Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another chapter of Experiencer Interviews. And today we've got another amazing soul coming to us from the US. We have Karin Wilkinson on board today. Karin is the author of the book Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest. She is a regular writer slash contributor to L.A. Marzulli's monthly newsletter, Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural. Karin is a wife, mother, and grandmother. She worked in the software industry for many years. For as early as she can remember, she has been abducted by non-human alien entities, possibly hundreds of times. She has seen many UAPs slash UFOs throughout her lifetime and suffered emotional and physical ailments due to the things they did to her. She prays that she can utilize her experiences to glorify God, to share the truth, and to help others in any way she can. So, Karin, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Gray. It's an honor to be here with you today. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm glad you've accepted my offer to come on because I guess your story is going to balance a bit what I've been through and all the guests that came on. There's a lot of them have positive, but I also want to show others that there's a lot of bad things that happen to other abductees as well. So thanks for coming on and agreeing to share with us. I know your story starts off as a young child, at least your contacts. Could you describe to us what happened, let's say in a first person type of
Mhm.
environment to
Sure.
because it's all in the details. So anything that you might be able to share might trigger somebody else.
Mhm.
So if you could try to help us that way.
Sure, absolutely. And I do want to preface it with the fact that, everyone has different experiences with this, and I don't disparage anyone who has a differing opinion to mine because it takes a lot of courage to share a story like this. There's such a stigma around it, and a lot of people don't want to hear, these types of things, or it's hard for them to grasp. So I appreciate anyone who's willing to share their story, and everyone's going to see things in their own light and differently. And what I'm trying to do is shed light on some of the truths behind what's happened, specifically what's happened to me and my personal experiences. I was taken from my earliest memories. Even before I have the concrete memories of the actual abduction experience from them showing up and taking me and all that. When I was very young, and like 2, 3 years old, I was terrified of family members who were tall and blonde and had big blue eyes and were thin because I was already experiencing what you call a Nordic entities. And these are Nordics, for those who don't know or may not be familiar, are non-human alien entities who look somewhat human. They have somewhat human features, but they tend to be very tall, very large eyes, probably like about twice the size of ours. They have very translucent, kind of bluish, blue-green eyes. And their hair is almost translucent, so it kind of looks blonde most of the time. And I had difficult encounters with them already where they were not, they were not nice to me as a very little child. So I was terrified of people who looked like that, who had those features, and wouldn't go to family members even who looked like that. But as I grew older, around 5 or 6 is when the really concrete memories start to, are there of being taken. And a typical abduction experience for me was it didn't matter where I was. I could be at home, I could be at grandparents' house, a friend's house. It didn't matter. Wherever I was, they found me. Um, I would wake up in the middle of the night, and if I was in a room with someone else, like a sibling or later in life, maybe a spouse or a partner, what have you, um, I wake up in the middle of the night and sense something different, sense a presence in the room, sense just an evil presence in the room too. Just that sense of dread would come over me. If I was in the countryside, quite often all the crickets and cicadas would just go silent. There'd just be like no outside noises all of a sudden. Sometimes there'd be a light coming in the window or a light coming from a window from another bedroom that I could see all the way to where I was. Um, and then I would generally see at least two, sometimes more, of the shorter gray, typical gray alien beings that people report seeing. These beings were about 4 foot tall, probably. They had big black screen-like eyes. Their eyes didn't move, it just like a screen covering where their eye would be. They had the big bulbous heads. very, very thin neck, very thin, frail looking bodies. Some of them did not smell very good. Some of them I could smell them before I saw them. It was like a cross between maybe sulfur and excrement and like a dead animal or something. It was a really weird, pungent, putrid smell. And some of them didn't have seem to have an odor at all. If I would try to wake up the other person who might be in the room with me at that time, depending, they would be in such a deep sleep state that I couldn't wake them up. If I tried to scream, no one would hear me. Um, and I would be put into a state of waking paralysis where I was wide awake, but I couldn't move my body. I couldn't scream. Like all I could move was like my eyes. I would just be terrified at that point. If I saw them before that paralysis came in, I was little, I would wet the bed because I was so scared. But I couldn't do anything to get away from them. And once I was in that state, sometimes they would talk to me, just mind speak. So like it was very intentional. I don't like to use the word telepathy because that assumes you're kind of reading someone's mind or something, and that really wasn't it at all. It was a very intentional speaking to me, and I could do the same back with them. And they would be things like, it's okay, you're okay, you know, just things to try to, just be calm, things like that. Just nothing that was really that helpful, quite honestly. But once I was in that state of paralysis, I would be levitated off of my bed. And the feeling that over my body was like a sense of like numbness and a vibration. There would sometimes be this really low vibrational hum that would just get like lower and lower, like the lowest key you can imagine. And I'd feel like this vibration throughout my body as I was being levitated towards a closed window or towards the ceiling. And I would go through that closed window or through that ceiling. And it was such a strange experience. We just don't have anything like it. And it's very hard to describe, except that it's like I was just in a bazillion little pieces and just moving through. And, they have this ability to manipulate space, time, energy, and matter in ways that we don't understand. And so it doesn't fit into our little view of the universe. So we have to make sure that when we think about it and I try to explain it, it's very difficult because it's outside of our little understanding of physics. It's not that they break the laws of physics, it's that they understand physics in a way that we don't. We're still learning these things. We have breakthroughs every day in science. So if that helps the listeners understand or how that could happen. I remember seeing just details in the ceiling, like the wallpaper, if it was brown or curled on the edges, because my grandma's house had wallpaper on the ceiling, but you wouldn't notice it till you were like right up there. Or watching the pictures on the wall just get further and further away. From outside, I could see still the house and see that, what was in there. At that point, generally, I would get put into a sleep state, like they had this ability to just turn, it was like flipping a switch. I'd be turned off and turned on and turned off and turned on. I would wake up, sometimes at elevators. They look like big elevator doors, and these would open. I would get in. Usually at this time, I'm still with the little grays. And I remember I was just always cold, always so cold. And these elevators would just go down and down and down. And I got on when I first started describing these, especially as a little kid, what I called the sideways elevators. Because back when I was little, cars and trains and buses and everything else were very loud. We didn't have any silent vehicles of any type, really. So I didn't understand that it was some type of vehicle, but it had benches in it and it would go back and forth or up at an angle or down at an angle and make really crazy turns and stuff. But it was silent. So I just equated it to another type of elevator and it really freaked me out when I was on it. But that would take me to wherever I was being taken that particular time. So I was in some sort of an underground facility most of the time. Those are most of my memories. And I don't remember every time I was taken. And I don't have complete memories of every episode from beginning to end. Sometimes I just remember them showing up. Sometimes I would just remember being put back in my bed, and my pajamas might be on inside out. Sometimes they'd be at the foot of the bed or in another room. And sometimes I would wake up in another room, and I would wake up and be so terrified and go like hide under my parents' bed and sleep under there the rest of the night so I could, feel safer. To this day, I don't have a side of the bed. I have whatever side is furthest away from the window. And I'm not afraid of them anymore. It's just such a habit for me. My husband was always like, "So you don't really have a side of the bed. Why are you always," I'm like, "I'm always away from the window." Um, and I didn't even realize I was doing that for the longest time. But it's funny what it does, to you. So when I would wake up, if sometimes I would wake up on an exam table, and there would be different beings around me, and they would just do different types of exams, all different things, checking every part of my body you can imagine, using machines I didn't understand. Obviously they weren't explaining things to me. It wasn't like going to a nice doctor's office where they're like, now we're going to do this or that. No, there was none of that. There was no kindness or gentleness happening there at all. Once I would be in the facility, wherever they were taking me, there were different types of entities. The grays were not these little cookie cutter grays that would come to pick me up, but the grays that were in these facilities were all different. They were different sizes and shapes and heights. Some had different, they had what looked like different facial features. Some looked more masculine, more feminine. Their faces moved differently. Their eyes actually moved, whereas the little ones, they were just, I really believe the small, shorter grays to be some sort of an avatar, like a meat suit, created to house, whether it could be AI, it could be a demonic entity, it could be another entity of some sort, anything like that. And when I talk about that today, I remind people, we can create skin in a lab. Why can't they? You know, so, and I do like to say too, none of these beings that I saw were identical except for those little grays. There were reptilians that all looked different. There were insectoids types that all looked different. The Nordics, they all look different. And I think that there's so many different types, but they kind of blur. Like there are some grays that looked more reptilian, and some reptilians that looked more gray, and some insectoid that looked more reptilian, or so there was some kind of blurring between them, and I couldn't tell you how many different kinds there were. I have no idea. So I just kind of classify them into those general groups, those four general groups of the grays, reptilians, the Nordics, and the insect type. When I was little, sometimes we would just go and they would put me in a room with other kids. And some of the kids seemed pretty normal, and some of them seemed very, very abnormal, like they had developmental disabilities or they looked very different from me. So some of them may have been like hybrids of some sort. I learned, they taught me things. They kind of just did like these data dumps into my head. And going to school was very easy for me in that respect because I just had all this knowledge. I didn't know where it came from. Understandings of math and physics that other kids didn't have. It was really weird. What I know is that where I was taken, all of these different entities worked together. None of them had our best interest at heart. When you're kidnapping little children or adults, when you're mutilating animals, taking someone against their will. I was raped against my will. I was kidnapped against my will. Those are not the actions of a benevolent space brother. And the ones that I was dealing with were not good beings. I'm not saying they aren't good because I have had very beautiful, positive angelic encounters as well. And I write about that in the book as well. Just so that people know, there is a balance out there. There is the dark and the light. There's the good and the evil. The issue I have sometimes with that is that I caution people about trying to contact or call on these entities because you don't know what you're going to get. They're stronger than we are. They're smarter than we are. They're so far advanced. They've been around so much longer than we have. They were here before humans were created. And my issue is when you think about good and evil in the world that we live in, and if you have, say you're on the street and there's somebody who's a rapist or a pickpocket or a murderer or a carjacker, they don't walk around advertising that. They lure you in. Someone who traffics children or adults or anything like that, they're going to lure you in and appear kindly, appear as your friend, appear as the good guy. So it's just like that, that's just the nature of good and evil. And I caution people, you may say, oh, but this is my, you know, spirit guide and he says he's good and all this. I'm like, but how do you know? That's the issue. Once it gets what it wants, how do you know if it's, and the only way you will ever know really is if something bad happens, unfortunately. And I would not want that to happen to anyone. But so I do caution people on that it is a risk that you take if you're calling on any of these entities.
How do you know that you were taken to a dump?
Well, I know that I was underground because we were on these elevators and we were going down. And I knew I was underground, because there were no windows. It was a very controlled environment. And so it was very obvious that we were not in the air or on the ground. We were definitely in a facility.
Okay. Um, do you recall ever being on a craft, seeing windows, seeing outside?
Absolutely. Oh, yes. There were times, especially later, those memories are more vivid later in life. I don't have any ship memories of them like landing in a yard or anything like that. But what I do have are memories of being inside the craft. And the thing that amazed me the most is that the craft are like alive. They seem to be like a living entity of some sort. And I don't understand how that works. It is so far beyond me. But when I would walk towards like the ones that seem to have a dome and go smaller on the edges that I would be in, and they're huge, they're not tiny. Some of them were small, but some of them were a lot bigger. It would move to accommodate me, it felt like. Do you know what I mean? So where it looked like it was going like this, I could still walk over there and fit, you know, to like where a window was or something so I could see out. And looking out, everything just looked like almost like waves on the ocean. You know what I mean? It's so hard to describe. And I don't know if that had to do with speed or I don't understand, but it was spectacular. And when I would be on these, I call them like transport vessels, because there would be other abductees there. And most people, and myself included, usually were in sort of a woozy state. Like it seemed like everyone was drugged. It was some sort of a sleep kind of state where we were just, it's like we call it UFO brain fog. It's like walking through molasses and your brain feels that way too. It's just like, you can't get the words, out. You're trying to, if, and I wasn't always in that state because I was compliant. I'd been taken so many times that there were points where I would just go along with it because I knew it was easier for me if I was compliant, if I was a good girl. And that comes from, being warned so many times, that not to tell anyone that they would hurt my family, that they would hurt me, that different things could happen. So, when I was about 6 years old, I had a very, very real kind of mental breakdown at school. And they found me huddled in the corner of a bathroom, and my mom had to come get me. And they had shown me my family being hurt is a like screen memory because I was trying to talk to people about it. And at that point in time, I didn't have vocabulary to say who and what these things were. They weren't saying, hi, I'm a gray or hi, I'm a reptilian. You know what I mean? I knew what they looked like, the little guys. And I would say things like, the little ones keep coming to get me and they're touching me. I don't like them. They don't smell good. I want them to leave me alone. They're hurting me, things like that. But nobody understood what I was talking about. And when you try to get more specific, that really busts open people's paradigm and they kind of shut down and they're like, okay, that's a dream. Or, okay, she's making things up. And I realized no one was going to help me. There was nothing I could do. And I didn't want them to hurt my family. And it was at that point that I just kind of gave up. And I felt like there's no one that's going to be able to, nothing I can do. And I kind of had this split where I created a part of me that dealt with what was going on with that, and a part of me that just lived the day to day and didn't even let it come in to view anymore. So it's kind of a dissociation, not a complete dissociative identity disorder, but definitely two very separate kind of personalities that lived inside of me. One was a protector who took on all that, and the other one got to just be a little kid. And my mom came, got me, and when I was having that kind of breakdown at school, and that's when I really did create that separation. She took me to the doctor because I kept saying, they're touching me, they're hurting me, they're bothering me. I don't want them to do it anymore. But I was afraid that even saying that they would hurt my family. She took me to the doctor and he said, that physically I was okay. And whatever was happening, I was little, I would forget. And it's not that they didn't care or they were sweeping it under the rug. They didn't have enough to go on. And it was a different time back in the 60s and 70s. It's not like it is today. And we didn't have camera phones and we didn't have recording devices and we didn't have monitoring things, so it was really hard to know for sure what was happening. And, if it was happening to any of my parents, they were in denial as well. So from that point on, I just really kind of separated it. And then I became more compliant. And so when I would be on these transport vessels, especially as an older, as an adult, and they were collecting other people, if people got unruly, they would cover them with what I called the sheet. It was like a white sheet kind of blanket thing. And it just immobilized them. It just kind of formed to them and it just stopped them from being able to move and try to be disruptive because maybe they were for some reason they couldn't get that person into the brain fog state. I don't understand how all that works, but I know what happened with people who weren't being compliant. And I had that happen to me, and I did not ever want that again because I just being immobilized like that was horrible. It was scary. So I think that's one of the reasons why I was compliant as well. It was just easier, it was easier to go along with it. I'll break for a minute in case you have more
Yeah.
questions.
You said something that really resonated with me. Was it the term UFO molasses?
A UFO brain fog is the
Okay.
term that I call, yeah. And my friend L.A. Marzulli, kind of coins that phrase. And I like it because it really does fit. And it is like walking through molasses,
Okay.
not just
That's
physically, but mentally, because you can't, not only can you not like run fast or punch hard or things like that, but you also can't get your thoughts as organized as you want. It's kind of scrambles everything. And I think that's a way to help keep people from remembering too much. And I think once I really had that kind of split where I just dissociated, they would pick me up and I just wouldn't even respond. I was just like a blank sheet of paper. And I think that's why I have the memories I do, because there was just really not a huge need to immobilize me if I was just going to go along with everything. And talking to other abductees as much as I have, and I talk to hundreds um in day to day just because of the work that I'm doing, they seem to have similar stories. The less we resisted, the more we remembered. The more we resisted, the more often we were just put into a sleep state. So that seems to have some correlation there.
um the reason why I'm talking about this is I haven't started only recently I started talking about my first nightmare ever as a kid. I suspect I was about the age of 4, but I remember waking up at night. The air was like was palpable. The energy, like the was like yeah,
Really?
I didn't feel drugged because I was like at the age of 4, I didn't really have like a term to put my finger on, but the air felt palpable, like weird, and I couldn't understand what was going on. Um, at the foot of the bed was well, this was a screen image, of course, but I saw like a 3 foot tall boxing glove doing this.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, whoa, that's big for a boxing glove. And so in that nightmare, I scream out to my parents. So both of my mom and dad come. My dad picks me up. And again, the energy like was way off. Like, what's happening? And I point to the boxing glove. And my parents, of course, don't see it. So I'm not sure if my parents also were a screen image and I was being picked up by
Yeah.
somebody else. I don't know. But yeah, so only recently I started talking about this, and I've been getting this, this feedback of the same type of energy that you described.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. What you described makes perfect sense. At one point, they used my elementary school principal as one of the figures that I would see when I was taken, so that I would, because it was an authority figure in my life. So they would use that during the abduction just so that I would behave, because I knew to behave and respect the principal at school. It was probably the highest, aside from parents and all that, the highest authority figure I had in my life. So they utilized that. They would utilize my grandfather and have me, follow trails. We're gonna find, I hid quarters in the driveway, and it's a long country driveway kind of thing with rocks and things. It's not like some nice paved driveway. Anyway, and use that as to get me walk towards what I'm guessing was wherever they had a ship, but so they used all kinds of different weird things like that, or a cat, or I used to love to chase after the frogs outside, so they'd have little frogs and things like that, just things that I found interesting or fun or endearing. They were able to tap into that and then use those for what I was seeing when they were coming to get me, to kind of get me out of the routine of the grays showing up every time.
Did you actually leave the house during the night on your own?
Oh, yes.
Wasn't the
Yes.
door locked?
Yes. Yes.
Oh. And did
Don't
you ever
see.
wake up outside at night and had to come
No,
back in?
I never woke up locked outside at night. They always got me back in. But my friend, I have a couple of friends, and we're all in this L.A. Marzulli's fourth movie on the UFO abduction phenomenon. And one of my friends who's in that movie, he was constantly waking up outside the house to the point they put locks on his door, locks on his window, reinforced the locks on the house. They would still find him out in the yard. And so many of us have this. Yeah, I woke up outside. I've talked to so many people who've woken up outside. So, all those years, I'm like, was I really outside in the driveway? But then you wake up and you've got, like, you know, your feet are dirty from being outside, but you were in bed. No, that doesn't fit, you know. So you've got these little things that don't quite add up. So, but I have woken up in other rooms of the house, absolutely.
Do you know why that they leave you outside at night? Doesn't make sense. Does it like to give you confirmation that something happened?
I don't know why. I know that sometimes the vessel that they're taking people in is outside, and for some reason, if for some reason, it's a very this the spiritual world, and these are all extra dimensional entities, clearly, that can go in and out of dimensions, is a very legalistic society. There must be permissions granted and given. And my this is a theory. Okay. So, but my theory on this is if they don't have permission to come into that house, then they've got to get you out, and they have to lure you out. And so they can still manipulate physics to get you out of the house outside a locked door. That part's easy for them. But the actual entry into your home is not easy if they don't have permission. It's just like the old vampire lore of the days of old. And that's why I think I mentioned to you before we started, my friend Vicki Joy Anderson has a book called The Only Come Out at Night. She's very good at explaining how all of that works for people who are curious about how those agreements work, how they're made, who can make them, and why. And you look at things like the Eisenhower Agreement, which, many people talk about. Okay, that I have a friend who left me a message the other day, who had talked to his niece, saying, that, or granddaughter, sorry, saying, that definitely wasn't a treaty, because a treaty is made between warring factions. And I agree with that. But the Greada agreement, or whatever it was basically giving permission for them to take people. So that's where one of those permissions could be. If somebody unknowingly invites someone into their home and doesn't realize this person is a non-human entity, but they look very human, which is very possible, then you're creating that agreement. Then you're inviting them over the threshold. So those agreements are very important. And I think that's why some people end up outside, because that's where they have to start to get them to wherever their vessel is. Because obviously they've got a physical vessel that we've been in, that I've been in, that others have been in, different kinds. That has to be somewhere, and they have to get you to it. And if they can't come in, they're going to take you outside.
My last guest, she believes that she was also being taken in exchange for technology.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
that is definitely, and that is something, if you look at ancient texts, ancient scrolls from many, many different cultures, including the biblical and the Christian cultures. The exchange for technology from the angels and the fallen angels was something that is in some of our earliest biblical texts and some of the earliest other religious texts across many different cultures and societies. That is there's and that's an agreement. So that goes back to that legalistic society, right? Okay, you want this? Give us that. In Genesis 6, when it says the sons of God, which is talking about the angels, the angelic beings, angels kind of a misnomer, but saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and took of them wives of all that they chose. That is where they exchanged the women for knowledge and technology in that point in time. And I write about that and share some more about that in the book, because that goes down a little more of an intricate road, and I don't want to bore everyone with all of that tonight, but
Um, Now, did you see any symbols on the Nordics or any like writing while you were
on,
being taken?
on their bodies
Yeah, on their
physically.
bodies or like panels with writing symbols.
Oh, yeah, there were symbols all over the place. There were like areas where on the ships where if you touched it, it didn't look like anything was there, and then it would light up with like a symbol. And on everyone in these facilities, there were humans there and there were non-human alien entities there, both working in conjunction with one another. And some of them had these weird, it was like an upside down triangle kind of symbol on their shirts. Some of them were in um like white doctor coat type things or lab coats. Some were in like these weird, just really beige, benign, like smock and pants suits that just matched, that were just really plain. Some were in like these kind of fatigues, but they weren't like green fatigues. They were more like a brown, black kind of color, gray. Um, and some trying to think of all the different types of, things as well, just different, you know, uniforms. But some of the uniforms had, yeah, like this triangular upside down triangle with the point at the bottom with the lines going through it. And I've drawn it a few times. I don't remember if I put that in the book or not, but but there were all kinds of weird symbols too that, I understood when they wanted me to understood what they had this ability to just help you understand whatever they wanted you to understand at the time. So,
Yeah, I've seen people describe the same upside down triangle with the line
oh,
in the
really?
center. Oh
Oh,
yeah,
really?
oh yeah, oh yeah,
Oh, okay,
oh yeah.
cool. I've never heard that before. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. I always like when I get a confirmation of something I've seen. That's pretty cool.
I know it's sweet. Now, as a kid or as a young adult, whatever, did you ever like wake up with like your nosebleeds?
Mhm. Yeah, nosebleeds, ears bleeding. I woke up with this triangle shape on my back that I still have today, and I put a picture of that in the book for the readers to see. Strange, just punctures or marks or things like that. I did have a thing in my elbow that it was just a couple of years ago that it finally came out, some kind of an implant. Um, I it made its way to like the surface. And so I took the skin off and I reached in with tweezers over the sink and I pulled it out, and it was about the size of a half a grain of rice. It looked like a black dot in the middle with a clear white coating, like a fleshy, clear white coating. As soon as I got it out, it jumped like it's not like I dropped it, but I was startled when I looked at it. It went down the sink like of its own volition. It just went straight down the sink. And I have this really wide, flat kind of sink, so it's not something to think something's going to roll real easy down. It's like textured. It went straight down the sink, almost like it was driving itself. It was so, because I didn't want it to go down, but then again, at the same time, I was so creeped out by it that I was just happy to get it. I wanted it out of my body. So all kinds of things like that. Yeah, physical marks, bruises, and then there was the missing pregnancies too. And if
Yeah.
anything, that's the most extreme that I had. And I've since talked to so many other women who've gone through the same ordeals that I did with the pregnancies, which was crazy.
Yes, you had phantom pregnancies, and I think you shared once a story about a possible assassination attempt on your life,
Um,
perhaps at the hospital.
yeah, I had yeah. Which would you like me to talk about or talk about?
Let's talk about the pregnancies first, and
Okay. When I was it started when I was younger in my 20s or late teens, early 20s. And I was married, so it wasn't unusual that I got pregnant. We weren't trying, so it was a surprise that I got pregnant. I went to the doctor and had all the tests done and blood tests back then, and got my prescription for my vitamins and had my doctor's appointments, and it was all confirmed I was pregnant. And my body knew it was pregnant. It was going through all the pregnancy changes and the hormones and everything else. And my doctor confirmed that baby was there. At about the end of the first trimester, I started spotting, and in the middle of the night, I woke up, my stomach hurt very bad, and I was just spotting, but I wasn't bleeding. Nothing came out of me, but I was in pain. So we went to the hospital and the went into the emergency room, and the doctors couldn't find a heartbeat. So they did an ultrasound and they couldn't see a baby. So they're like, well, you didn't lose this baby at home. You don't remember the baby. And I'm like, no, I would know if something came out of my body, right? It's not like you wouldn't see something come out. And so um they did a DNC, which is where they go and they scrape your uterus to remove any remaining tissue in there so that you don't get an infection, or in case there's, still something in there, and also to find out what went wrong and why the pregnancy terminated. And they did a DNC and they came back and they said, ma'am, are you sure you were pregnant? And I'm like, yes, you can call my doctor. It was all confirmed. We went through all the stuff. There's a baby in there. There's a heartbeat in there. There's all these things, right? And I'm like, why? They're like, because there was no fetal tissue in your uterus. Your uterus was just clean. And they couldn't explain to me what happened to my baby. And I didn't get to mourn the loss of that baby. I didn't get to know if it was a boy or girl. It was devastating. And then for them to say, well, maybe you weren't pregnant. I was pregnant. My doctor confirmed it. My body confirmed it. But the easiest thing for them to do is to say, well, maybe, people like to use that phantom pregnancy. Well, what is that? That's a term to use when you don't know what happened. Or hysterical pregnancy. People use that term too. My body was pregnant. I was pregnant. My doctor confirmed I was pregnant. This happened multiple times. And I've had successful pregnancies, and I know what it felt like to be pregnant. I know what it feels like to be pregnant. I know what your body goes through and changes, and what it feels like to have something in your uterus. So, this happened several times. And then I realized eventually what was happening was that the fetus was being taken. Because you don't have that much pain from from a non-existent pregnancy. I mean, at one time they thought maybe it was a tubal pregnancy. Okay, well, maybe it's up in their fallopian tube, and they looked up there and there was nothing there either, so it wasn't for lack of looking. They really did look for those babies because they knew I had been pregnant. So, and now, since then I've talked to so many women, and it's been such a relief to them to hear my story and to read my story or whatever, however they heard it, because they felt alone their whole lives and they didn't have anyone to say, yeah, that's terrible. You were pregnant. Because all they've ever had is people saying, you weren't really pregnant. That didn't really happen. And I still get that to this day. And that's fine. People don't have to believe me. That's fine. That's up to them. But I know what happened to me. And I did see those children later. There was an abduction where I was taken back into these facilities, and these underground facilities are huge. And try to explain it to people, like, if you imagine the biggest stadium, like football stadium and airport and high school and all that just together, and then bigger. I mean, there are giant rooms and tiny rooms. There are hallways and elevators and stairs and doors, and it's very confusing and huge and just a labyrinth of things and going on. And this particular time, I was taken down a hallway I never remembered being down before. And I'm dealing with UFO brain fog, so I feel like I'm just trying really hard to concentrate on what I'm seeing because it was new to me. And the hallway that we were walking down was very darkly lit, as almost everything was there. Most areas were very darkly lit, like almost a red blue backlight. And there were what looked like, if you've ever been to a pet store and seen those walls with all the aquariums, it looked like that. There were just all these like tanks on the wall. The wall was just all tanks. And in them, there were some sort of fetuses, it looked like. And nobody was like telling me what they were. It's just what they looked like to me. And at that point too, I'd never, we didn't have these as much information as we have today. I'm trying to think if I'd ever seen a picture of what a fetus looked like at different stages, like they do now in like Time magazine and stuff. But so we get to the end of that hallway, and I mean, I'm trying really hard to focus on what's in these tanks. I don't know if they were human, if they were alien, if they were hybrid. I don't have all of that information. But we get to the end of the hallway, and there's a door on either side, and then it goes to a normal hallway where there's no tanks. And so they open the door to the right, and it's the size of an oversized closet. And I go in, and they lead me in, they being the entities that are with me. I think it was a gray and a Nordic at that point, but I can't. Yeah. And in the room is another woman, a human, and she's on the floor imitating childbirth. And she has a little baby in her hands, and she's pretending to give birth to it. And I'm just like, what is going on? I'm just like, I don't like this. Not that I liked any of it, right? But and then he's a gray, hands me a baby. And it says that, I don't know if it's a he or she. It's so hard to tell. This one looked kind of feminine though. Um, this is your baby. It's a good baby. Hold your baby. And I take this baby, and it just keeps telling me it's a good baby, it's a good baby. And I look at this little baby, and it's very small, and it's almost blue purple in color, kind of reddish blue, so it's kind of purpley. It had a big head and big eyes, bigger than my human babies, so I could tell it was some sort of a hybrid, but I could tell it was mine immediately. I just knew. There's just that mother's instinct. And maybe it wasn't, but if it wasn't, I wanted it to be, because I'm holding this baby. So I hold it up to me like I would any baby or even a kitten or something, and it won't cuddle into me. It's just not responding to me. It's alive, but it's not responding to me holding it. And I keep looking at it going, what's wrong with my baby? And trying to hold it, trying to get it to respond to me. And it's just not responding at all. And I'm getting very upset. And they're upset that I'm upset. And she's like, just hold your baby. It's a good baby. I'm like, it won't cuddle me. What's wrong with my baby? Now I'm getting upset. I'm like, okay, well, it's time to go. And I'm like, no, no, no. I'm taking my baby home, because I'm thinking to myself, I can fix it. I can help it. I can get whatever it needs, right? To make it right. Something's wrong with this baby. And they're like, no, you can't take this baby home. And I'm like, yes, this is my baby. I'm taking it home. I'm belligerent at this point. And so that's the point where they just switch me off. And the next thing you know, I wake up, I'm in bed, no baby, and I'm devastated. And I just remember crying and being so devastated that I didn't have this baby, because I didn't know what was wrong with it. I didn't understand what a hybrid really was at that point, so I just thought I could fix it. I could help it. I could heal it. But, that was so hard. It was really hard. But then I did see them, saw three of my children later, and many years later. I woke up in the middle of the night, and I see three kids standing beside my bed along the side of it. And I'm waking up and I'm like, hey, so and so, what's wrong? I said one of my children's names as I'm, trying to focus and wake up, how blurry you get when you wake up. And then I realized, wait a minute, that's not that child. This kid's too short and too stocky to be. But I have a lot of kids, so to have three of them show up at the side of the bed in the middle of the night would not be unusual. Okay, so I was just like, what's wrong? Maybe they're trying to make popcorn or watch a movie and they need me to help them with something. You never know. But my kids were more grown at this point, so they weren't that short. And so I hit my husband. I said, hey, wake up. Oh my gosh, wake up. You got to see this. And he is in just a dead sleep state. He will not move. He won't wake up. He won't budge. I hit him. I yell his name. He won't move. So I turned back to there's three of them and they're boys, or they look like boys. They're all wearing what looks like a gray hooded sweatshirt almost type of thing. And so the hoodie's over their head and it's kind of down a little bit over their face. And it's dark, but I can tell their skin almost looked blue and their eyes looked very, very black. Were they black eye kids? I can't tell for sure because there wasn't enough light in the room for me to see that clearly. But I look back at them, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's you. I knew these were my kids. It's that mom instinct because I have a lot of kids. I have a lot of kids that call me mom that aren't my birth children that I love. But my birth children, I can pick, I just know, and so I knew these were mine. And I was so excited. I mean, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's you. And I'm like, the next thing I know, I just feel like this evil coming off of them. I mean, it was like a wave hitting me, crashing into me. And I'm shocked. And I'm like, what's wrong? And their mind speak again, they went, you have to come with us. At this point, I've stopped the abductions. I've learned that these beings have the same creator that I have. And I can call on our creator and they have to go. And they no longer had permission. But the reason these children were there is because I was wanting my kids. And I was saying, God, I just want them. Please just let me see them. Let me have them. Let me fix them. I didn't understand. And so I was giving that permission for them to be there. And they kept saying, you have to come with us. And I just felt this anger coming off of them. I'm like, why are you so angry? Nothing in this had anything to do with me and it was completely out of my control. And I had prayed for them and prayed about them. And it was just evil. And they just kept saying, you have to come with us. I said, no, I'm not going back. I'm never going back to that, and they were just getting more and more angry and the evil was just building. And finally, as I'm saying, no, I think just almost habitually, but I'm just like, no, in Jesus' name, no. The second I say Jesus, in Jesus' name, they're gone. And my husband sits straight up in bed. He's like, what? As if I had just tried to wake him that second. And I'm just like, now you wake up, and I understood why he couldn't, at that point. But I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, you're not going to believe what just happened. They were here and it was, and I was devastated but at the same time, I had closure and I understood what they were, that they were hybrid. They weren't human. They didn't seem to have a soul. They didn't seem to have that love. Are they redeemable or not? That's not for me to say. I'm not God. I'm not their creator. But what I can say is what I felt from them was just pure evil. Then it was ugly. But I did get closure. I got that chance and I would not recommend that to anyone because it was scary. And had I not had the proper tools, had I not understood the full armor of God, had not understood the legalities of all that and that I was protected and covered, I could have been taken and that could have been a really devastating situation because they clearly did not want to good things for me.
I'm so sad that you had to go through that.
It is, but it gives me the opportunity to share with people who and what they are. And so, yeah, it was terrifying and it was emotional. And I'm just now to the point that I can talk about it without crying, because I talk about it so much now. I can talk about these things without bursting into tears, but I do have my Kleenex right here because I still often do. I got closure. Because I really, you feel as a mom when there's a child out there. It's just some kind of instinct that God gave us. And thank you for your compassion on that. I really appreciate that. And I got to share with others who wanted the same thing and say, here's what it is. Here's what happened for me. And this is what I know about it. And just to help comfort other women who've gone through this. So it's given me some tools to help comfort, some tools to help talk to other people about it and to share about it. So for that, I will always be grateful.
Mm. Coming back to your first baby, do you know if the
Mhm.
baby was ill? And that's the reason why it was
I
brought to you?
don't, I
I,
don't
I
know.
had somebody on not too long ago, and they took her on board because her hybrid child was ill, one of many, but the others were okay, but that specific baby was ill, and
Yeah.
the Grace said that she had too much human in her, and she needed the touch of a human. And as soon as she took her child to her,
Hmm.
uh, after a few moments, color came back to her body. Her
Wow.
skin started to change. And
Wow.
eventually the Grace
That
took the
makes
baby
sense.
back. But yeah, so
That
I
makes
thought it could have
sense
been the
because
same
they
for you.
wanted me to hold the baby and they wanted me to hold it to my skin. They were, and because I do remember just holding it right up to my skin, and that contact and expecting to feel a response. So that makes sense. Maybe it was. I don't know because they didn't tell me. The one thing about them that I find so frustrating, especially for when I'm talking to people about it, is, they're not offering information. I can tell you what I know based on what I remember and what I observed, but they didn't offer a lot of helpful information as far as what they were doing and why. There was some information, but obviously, I would have liked to have known what was going on. But I never, mm, if I did go back to that baby or see it again, I don't remember. That's a memory I don't have back. And for those listening, I've never done any regression therapy. The memories I have are just the memories I have. And when I allow myself to relax into it and not be afraid, I still have more memories that open up and I get more details, but it's scary and it's difficult to let those memories in, even though I know I don't have to be afraid anymore. So I'm sure that, if I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it's possible that I could remember more of that, of those incidents, but what I have right now are the memories I have. And I try not to share anything that I don't have a good, clear memory of, because I don't want anyone to get, false information from me. That would be devastating. So
So you never were like trained on board a craft?
I
Oh,
was,
oh,
yes, I was trained to fly one of these little craft. And I don't talk about that a lot because I don't like to glamorize it, but I do write about it and I will talk about it. There was, so what it was like was, um, it was small. There was there were two chairs back to back, and they were like those kind of egg-shaped chairs, if you've ever seen those kind of half egg chairs. And I would get in, when I sat down, it formed to my body. So it literally conformed and fit into and conformed around my body and my hands especially. And there were like controls kind of lit under where my hands and my were, but I didn't have to press any controls or do anything. I don't know if they were controls or what it was, but it was some of those symbols again that we talked about earlier were on that chair. And then around too, because there was obviously ship around us. So opposite me, facing the other way, was a gray. And so I never did this alone. I was always with another entity. Um, and it was the ship, you could see through it. Like I could see through, I could see the walls and the controls and all the things around me. You could also see through it. This is so hard to explain. We have windows today that you can't see in, but you can see out, or like two-way mirrors. It was kind of like that, but at the same time, like it was see-through and solid at the same time. Gosh, it's so hard to describe. And it kind of, you could think about it and make it more clear. It responded to my thoughts. The ship itself seemed to be very much alive and responding to me. And the movements were by my thoughts and the slightest movements of my hand. And it came out of the end of there were these little ones in a big ship, and they came out of the end almost like a soap bubble coming off of a wand. They just kind of popped out like that. And it would just go, it was so well because it would just go straight up and straight down. And it was just the most exhilarating, crazy feeling to do that, to get real close to trees and then go way up, and everything. And I don't have any memories of going to other solar systems or planets or anything like that. And, nothing like that ever that I have memories of. But that is the memories I have of being on one and getting to pilot. And I got to do that quite a bit. And that was one of those things where it's like, I equate it to like when you're in an abusive relationship, and to keep you going, every now and then you'll get a nice little gift. Like, here's a pretty dress. And then next time you turn around, you're, getting locked in a closet or something. It's the kind of, oh, sorry about that. Here's something fun for you to do. You know what I mean? It was just kind of that keeping you on the string. A lot of grooming going on, a lot of I had a lot of Stockholm syndrome type relationship going on with the whole thing as well, where you get, which is capture bonding for those who might not know what that is, where when people are kidnapped, they will sometimes bond to their captor because this is the person providing you food, water, safety in an unsafe environment, right? But keeping you alive. And your mind creates this inappropriate bond with that person. And I kind of had a lot of that going on. And I've talked to a lot of other abductees who've felt exactly the same way. And some people are still in that Stockholm syndrome and that capture bonding, because when you really look at it from a nuts and bolts perspective, I can't, for me, justify kidnapping a little kid. I can't justify rape, and I was raped. And you look at cattle mutilations, and they're using that blood, we think, probably for these fetuses, because bovine blood can be used in place of human blood, and most people don't know that. So I can't justify those actions and as the actions of a benevolent being. If they are so smart and so far advanced of us, which tells me that there are better ways and other ways to communicate and to offer information and to get whatever it is they need, other than terrorizing little children and animals. And that's my opinion, and I respect everyone else who might have a different opinion too. That's fine, but that's just my opinion on the matter.
I remember you describing or talking about the fact that you'd rock back and forth as a kid because of the trauma.
Oh yeah, yeah, a lot of that, yeah. Just it's funny the things that as a little kid that you do to compensate. Well, like even while we're talking about it here, I'm twisting a little piece of paper
Yeah.
because the things that are painful, it's just a way to kind of let that pain go somewhere else instead of on my face or in my voice. I can let that out somewhere else. You know what I mean? Especially when we talk about the kids, because that's really hard for me. That's really painful for me.
I'd
So
sleep with my entire belly against the wall as a kid because I knew it would be behind me. So
mm,
fear was there. So if I'd felt safe sleeping against the walls. I slept like that up until the age of 11, roughly.
wow. Yeah, well, I understand that completely. Yes. Like I said, I mean, I would get under the covers and close my eyes so tight and be as far away from the windows and the doors as I could be. And I remember my older sibling saying to me, it doesn't matter. And oh, that was the other thing. Like I'd try to find places to hide at night. Like I thought if I could get in a suitcase and zip it up and put it under the bed, because my grandma had these big zipper suitcases that were huge, that maybe they wouldn't find me there. And I remember my older sibling saying, it doesn't matter where you go or where you hide, they can see you no matter where you are. So we are little kids, like little. Like I was probably 5 when we had that conversation, talking about them can see through the house and we can't hide from them. what little kids have conversations like that? That's not just something you pick up from TV, because that wasn't something that was on TV. We didn't have books or movies or things like that to explain any of this to us. We were just scared like you were. We were just scared little kids who didn't want to be bothered and poked and prodded and taken away from our homes. Your bedroom, your home, your bed is supposed to be a safe place. And that safety didn't exist for us.
I know, growing up in the 70s, we had 3 channels, so we didn't know anything about ETs,
Right.
abductions,
We
and
had
whatnot.
4, 6, 10, and 13 sometimes, and that U channel sometimes
Yeah,
something.
either you and that's so funny.
But
Um,
otherwise, it was just that, yeah, TV screen fuzz.
yeah. So, at what age did the event at the hospital happen?
Oh, oh, that was not long. That was about 8 years ago, maybe. That was not long ago.
Get into
Oh, yeah,
that.
I've had a couple of things like that happen since I've been talking. I went in for surgery and was taken into the operating room, and I had 2 IV ports in, but I was not hooked up to IVs. I was not hooked up to machines or monitors, but I was actually in the operating room on the operating table waiting for the doctor because for some reason he wasn't quite ready. But they had taken me in anyway, and I didn't have any meds on me in me yet or anything. And it wasn't my first surgery, so I wasn't nervous about that. I was familiar with this surgeon. And there were 2 nurses in there that were just walking around prepping the room, doing stuff, weren't paying attention to me. And an anesthesiologist or a nurse anesthetist or whatever she was, woman came in. She had a white lab coat, short dark hair, leaned over me. She had a pocket full of syringes, pulled one out and pushed it into my IV port and turned and walked away. I thought it was a sedative, which I was happy about getting because it just relaxes you so much. And she turned and walked away, didn't say, "How's that feel? How are you?" Nothing. She turned and walked away and never saw this woman again, ever. I tried to find her. I've never been able to locate her, find her name, anything. Anyway, so what she gave me was not a sedative, it was a paralytic. And not being hooked up to anything and not having anyone around me, I died on that table. As I sat there, I laid there, and my body turned to what felt like cement almost immediately. I couldn't call for help. I couldn't signal for help. I couldn't do anything, and I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. And I remember I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm like, God, help me. And I heard an audible voice in my head say, "It's okay, you can let go now." It was the most beautiful voice I've ever heard. And all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, I'm out of my body. And I feel like I'm above and to the side of my body. And now I can see everything. I can see my body. I can see the nurses. I can see the doctor in the adjoining room getting stuff ready. I can see the hallway, everything. It's like walls didn't prevent me from seeing. I could hear without ears, see without eyes, that kind of thing. I was still me. My personality was still me. It was me, just without any of this external stuff. I felt the most unbelievable, incredible, indescribable peace and love. There's just no words to describe it. It was just the most beautiful feeling. I mean, I, there's no way to describe it. It was just incredible peace beyond all understanding. Love that I never knew existed. I was not afraid. I knew everything I needed to know in that moment. I knew that I was going to just wait right there beside my body. I had no fear. I had no worries. I didn't go down a tunnel and see a bright light. I didn't go see my relatives or anything like that. I just kind of knew that this was just a little hiccup. I was going to be back in there. Um, I watched the nurses as they realized something was wrong. One of them was like, "Is she having an allergic reaction?" And the other nurse comes over and she's like, "She's not breathing." And then the other nurse goes and runs in and gets the doctor, and he comes out yelling, bag her," and from I can see things that they're doing what I would not have been able to see from laying down like that. The expressions on everyone's faces, the things they're saying and doing. And they put that bag over my face, and it didn't do anything. And as they're doing that, there's all kinds of things going on, and people start running in the room. And now we've got, half a dozen people doing stuff and trying to revive me. And the next thing I know, I'm watching them, put my head back, and they they intubate me. And all of a sudden, I taste the metal in my mouth. And that's it. Everything went black. So I was back in my body at that point. If anything else happened at that point, I don't remember. And if God wants me to remember, I will, but I don't. So the next thing I know, I woke up in the recovery room. They went ahead with the surgery, which is a massive spinal reconstruction. And usually when I wake up in a recovery room post-surgical, because I've had some surgeries from this, there's one or two nurses and a bunch of people, and they're just kind of looking after people, watching them wake up, giving you ice chips, things like that. Not this time. This time I woke up and there was about 6 doctors and nurses standing around me. I woke up just screaming in pain to the point that they kept having to put me back under because I was screaming. I was writhing in pain. I don't know if it was coming back into this body with such a jolt, but I've never felt like that coming out of surgery before. Eventually, and this had to be about 3.5 hours into it. I've never been in recovery for 4 hours either, but this time I was. I remember going, God, please help me. And the next time I opened my eyes, there's 2 handsome young orderlies at the foot of the bed. They look like brothers. They're dressed the same. They look really similar. They calmed me down. They helped me through the recovery. They were sweet as pie. I remember talking to him going, you look like you could be 2 of my boys, 2 of my sons. You're so handsome and sweet. Thank you. I'm just thanking them profusely because they calmed me. And all of a sudden, everything's fine. I'm going there. Now they're taking me up to ICU to my room. And the 2 people that I get to have there were my husband and my daughter-in-law, who are always there for me post-surgical. And I remember, getting out of the elevator, going down the hall, and they're pushing me down the hall. And I get to the room and I grab my husband's hand and my daughter-in-law's hand. And I'm like, you have to meet these boys. Oh my goodness. I would not have made it through recovery without them. I was in so much pain, and they just calmed me down. They're the sweetest boys. I'm looking at my husband going, honey, they look like it could be our boys. They're just my kids all look different. Okay. So, but they're like, yeah, definitely. And I'm like, and I look up and they're not there. And I look at the nurse and the other orderly who are on either side of me. And I said, what happened to the boys? And she's like, what boys, honey? And I said, the 2 boys that were with me in recovery, they were with me in the elevator and down the hall. I've been talking to them the whole time. Do you know where they went? I want to thank them. And she's like, honey, it's only just been me and whatever his name is, the other orderly. I'm like, no, I've been talking to these guys the whole time. She's like, no, honey, we wondered what you were doing, who you were talking to, and nobody else saw them but me. And I searched that hospital high and low. I asked every doctor, every nurse, everyone who had anything to do with my case, A, who was the woman in the operating room, and B, where did these 2 orderlies go? And I really think they were angels. They were good, angelic beings. And that's why I say to people, there are beautiful, good, benevolent, positive beings of light, angelic beings, good, godly, beautiful entities out there. And they came and they helped me, but they did not interfere. They stayed only to do what they were called to do, and then they were gone. They didn't hurt me in any way. They only helped me. And I asked for help, and that's why they were there. So there's a huge difference there between them and the other entities. And when I think about them, all I can do is smile. But then when I think about the other ones, it's a whole nother. So it just, yeah. Have I had attempts on my life? Yes. Do I pray about that every day? Yep. And I know God is protecting me. But there definitely is some unhappiness that I'm sharing this story. So I'm just careful. I'm not going to stop because this is helping people. There are people who are so grateful that they've been able to learn about the story and then share their stories with me. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not doing anything like that. What we're doing is sharing the stories that we have in common and the kindness and the bond of having gone through similar traumas and how to stop it and how to get out of it and how to heal from it. I did PTSD therapy after that near-death experience because of how it happened. That therapy helped me deal with this lifetime of difficult, challenging, brutal encounters. That's why I'm able to talk about it today. That's what spurred me to reach out to LA Marzulli, to all of this. That's what gave me the courage and the strength to do it, is not just God's urging and love, but that therapy that I had showed me how to deal productively with these really difficult memories.
Could you tell us what's a paralytic?
Oh, sure. So a paralytic is just a drug that they give you often when you're having, like when I have surgeries on my spine. So it's a drug that they'll give you once you're put under anesthesia and you have machines breathing for you and monitors on you. Then they can give you a paralytic that keeps you from moving so that you don't accidentally injure yourself during a surgery. So that was that type of drug that I was given. It's just something that paralyzes you as if you had no ability to move at all. And it's given in really light doses so they can bring you out of it to make sure you can still move if they're doing something perilously close to your spine, which, in my case, they would be doing. So that's what that is.
Okay, so this is not your normal procedure.
No,
Right.
no,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. Karen, just to finish off the interview, do you have like a closing statement or perhaps another story that you might want to get out?
Yeah, I would love to just share some final thoughts for people, if that's okay. One is, there's a big stigma around this topic, and I really want people to start talking and to make it okay to talk about things like UFOs, UFO abductions, aliens, alien abduction, that type of thing. It's becoming more accepted. Even our own Congress, the halls of Congress are buzzing with information about this. We are on a path to disclosure, but that's not going to necessarily happen until the powers that be decide they want it to happen, or until these entities force it. But if you have had something like this happen to you, or someone who has, just if you know someone who has, I encourage you to listen just with an open heart and open mind. You don't have to believe what someone is telling you. You just have to be there for them and be a friend and be encouraging, because a lot of this does bust through people's paradigms really, really hard because it's not something that fits. If it's happened to you, I encourage you to, reach out to me through my website. You can leave me a message. You can find me on social media, Karin Wilkinson. You'll find the blue check mark, you found me. But if you send me a message that way, it'll take a while to get to you because I get so much spam in there and so many messages that it takes me a while to sort through. So you can reach out to me at my email address. Just go to my website, which is KarinWilkinsonAuthor.com, and I'll give you all this for the show notes. And on there is a contact page that goes straight to my inbox. And I'm the one reading those and answering those, no one else. It might take me a while sometimes. If you haven't heard from me, send me a second one in case something happened. But I will get back to you. Reach out to people, find someone, you can trust. If you can't, reach out to me and I'll, tell you, hey, there's conference. Like if I'm going to be at a conference, go to that conference. You'll meet other people you can talk to about this. And then I encourage people, be careful when it comes to this subject, because these beings, you don't know what you're going to get. And you're not necessarily going to get a benevolent, loving space brother if you go calling on these things. I always say, don't look up for them, look up for him. Look up for our Savior, our Lord, our Creator. We all have the same Creator. I'm not overtly religious, but I do write all of these things from a biblical lens because it is our guidebook to life, our guidebook to the supernatural. There are many, many amazing answers in there. People don't understand how much good information is in there. So there are a lot of resources out there. If you just do some searching, you can find resources, myself, other people, good people like Mr. Gray here, who are doing what they can to help keep, let people know and make it okay to have these conversations. I just can't tell you how much, Mr. Gray, I appreciate the work that you're doing, giving people a platform to share these stories. Sometimes just talking about it is all someone needs to do, and it's going to change their life, and it's going to make everything, it's going to turn things around, and it's going to turn around for someone else because they're going to hear it and they're going to know that they can be okay too. I'm okay. And you can be okay too. No matter what you've gone through, there is always a way. And if you're feeling distraught and you're feeling like there are hotlines you can reach out for. The suicide prevention hotlines are amazing. There are just so many resources out there. So please don't give up. These dark things can be hard, but you can get through it.
If somebody wants to purchase your book, how do they proceed?
The book is available. You can go to my website or to my social media, and there are links on there under my name. Karin Wilkinson author is the website, and Karin Wilkinson on social media. The book is available exclusively at lamarzulli.com. Or when I'm at events, I have it with me there too. Or you can just reach out to me and ask me on my website, and I can get one to you that way as well. If you want a signed copy, I'm happy to do that. lamarzulli.net or .com, LAMARZULLI.com or .net, and go to his store page. Or like I said, I'll be at events. I'll be at a Prophecy Watchers conference later this month in Colorado Springs, Colorado. This is June. I don't know when this will air. And in July, I will most likely be in Brookville, Ohio at the Go Therefore conference. I'm having some surgery done after that, so y'all might not see me for a month or two, but I'll get back out there as quick as I can. So yeah, just reach out to me. If you can't find the book, let me know and I'll help you get a hold of it. And I just really appreciate everyone who gets a copy of it and supports me. That means so much. I'm just, trying to get the word out and help wherever I can. So thank you.
Well, thanks, Karin, for coming on again. And thank you for being so brave. Really, it takes a lot.
Well, thank you. You're brave too. I love your stories too. And thank you for sharing with me. And thank you again.
All right. And to those watching, hope you enjoyed today's interview. I'm your host, Mr. Great. More interviews come up, and I'll see you guys next time. So take care, everyone. Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Great, and thanks for watching today's episode. If you are an abductee, contactee, or experiencer, and you believe that your story could help others, please feel free to contact me through my YouTube channel email. When it comes to experiencers, the ET phenomena, and the future, remember, truth will out.